Gary Patton, firstly, congratulations. How do you think the debate went?
I think it went excellent. I think there was a majority view by most of the candidates, the non-major party candidates, that there's definitely something wrong within Australian politics and the representation of the Australian people.
Now, when it comes to representation of Australian people, you've argued for, I guess, changes in the way, changes in the way government works, and your central line idea seems to lead towards an idea of direct democracy. Would it be correct to say that it's more that that approach? So to describe it as direct democracy would be a kind of a more correct way of describing the way that you're proposing of your voting occurring.
That's exactly the way to describe it. We are proposing a system of direct democracy, which is based on the new democracy model, and that is getting people to using technology. As I said, we're centred on lines of paradigm shift in Australian politics. Never before have the Australian people had access to directly influencing the vote on the floors of Parliament, and that's exactly what we're offering.
Now, on your website, you said, I'll quote here from your website, that this country once again be returned to providing good government as set out in the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act of 1901 and its 8 subsequent legal amendments. Now, the conventions of the running of the system of government and conventions of how the system of government is run are set by convention and not by the Constitution. How will this approach, I guess, help with your system of voting?
What do you mean by convention as opposed to constitution?
The structures of Parliament, although the Senate and the House of Reps are set apart in the Constitution, there's not much detail on how anything should really be run. I was just wondering, I guess, what do you consider has constitutionally has gone wrong for you to be making the statement?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a little bit long-winded, but prior to 1898, there was a series of referenda where the Australian people were able to vote on formulating a constitution. That was enacted in 1901 as the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1901. That's the supreme law of this country. Everything's set out in that. The requirements for someone to run as a member of Parliament, how the laws will work, how the states will work. Now, what's happened over the years is that worked quite well, probably up until about the 1940s, but definitely in the 1970s we had the two-party political system started to usurp the rights of everyday Australians by trying to take away the power that is invested in the people of Australia through the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1901. In what way, though? I can't think of a change to the electoral system beyond the ways that some senators were appointed. Those were relatively minor changes. Yeah, but in terms of the Constitution, like the Constitution's owned by us, the Australian people. All right, the politicians are supposed to be the servants of the people, and what happened was in 1984, Bob Hawke introduced the letters patent. And then in 1986, the Australia Act. Both have sufficient impact on the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1901 that they should have been presented to the Australian people via referendum, right? And they weren't. So in terms of our Constitution being the supreme law, those two documents are actually unconstitutional, right? So in terms of the structure, we're not looking at changing the structure of the government or changing the structure of Parliament. What we're looking to do is to bring the voice of the Australian people into the Parliament. So we can't have 23 million people sitting in Parliament. So what we'll do is we'll actually get up there and we will invite, well, every Australian can do it, whether they vote for us or not. They can get up there, they can register with Senator online, and there'll be a very stringent verification process to make sure that no one can get the electoral roll and create multiple identities to try and stack the vote. And as the bills come or legislation's tabled in Parliament, that will be obviously given to the MPs so they can review it. In that period of review, that information will be sent out to everyone, every Australian that's registered. They'll get probably a text message, an SMS. Then they'll go to the site. They'll see the information. They'll see the pros and the cons. and they'll actually have a chance they'll actually have the senators and all the members of the House of Reps will be there with their opinions and information regarding it. They'll have a chance to vote. That vote will go back to the MP, senator, and then that MP or senator is legally obligated, based on the majority view within that electorate, to vote according to that majority view.
Are you not concerned that political disinterest and disaffection among voters and among just the general public might mean that only a small number of people actually partake in trying to influence the MPs, and that might actually change the way that it might not provide a proper representation of the electorate?
Look, in terms of apathy within the electorate, within the Australian people, yes, there is a political apathy there. Over the last 3 or 4 years, there's been an increase in people, how politically savvy people are. People have had a gutful, if I can put it that way. Yes, and so we're trying to get people to, I'd ask you the question, have you ever read the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1901?
Yes.
Right, so great, but you're in the very, very, very small majority, and that's what I'm trying to do, is get the Australian people to read that, to find out what their rights and that are, how the country should be set out, and then go from there.
Not too many rights set out in the Constitution, but regardless of that, the obvious concerns are that the apathy will your system does rely on people from ceasing being apathetic, and it doesn't. Do you expect people to stop being apathetic, or do you really think that you will be able to get this kind of voting system working? Okay,
going back just after Federation and for the first 40 years of this country, people weren't apathetic. People were actively involved. I remember my grandparents and parents being involved in a small way, but being very politically aware. It's been the last 40 years that awareness has dropped off. Yes, you mentioned about the minority, and there's only a small number of people might respond to it and all that. But what I've got to tell you is that at the moment, there's less than 2% of the Australian population are active members of a political organisation or actively involved in politics. Right. So if you look at 2% of the population are currently being lobbied by big business and by lobby groups and self-interest groups to actually formulate what legislation is going to be created. So, if I can get 3% of the population to vote on an online poll for Senator online, so that their voices are heard on the floor, in Parliament, right? I'm 1% better off than what the status quo is now.
But the status quo does see 90-something% of people vote.
But it'll always be. It won't be a. It's not an election. We're not talking about election. In terms of.
No, but elections are on policy, and you are talking on deciding policy based on this voting.
I think we're getting a bit confused here in terms of what you've got is you've got an election, right? Now we're not talking about having an election. We're talking about gaining a consensus of information to actually inform the vote. Right?
But your informed vote it's based on, well, rather, an election would see policy approved of policy. Elections are fundamentally wars of policy, and so it's the same thing.
No, in actual fact, the Senator Online model is based on the referendum model. So effectively, with a referendum, you have to get 75% of the population to agree on it before the referendum passes, and that's the same with. Yeah.
No, it's double majority, but go on.
Sorry?
It's a double majority, but go on.
No, it's 75% of the vote to get it through. So you want to check that because, in terms of
50% plus one, and more than half of the states.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what your view is on.
That's what's in the Constitution.
Do you view it as being? Do you view direct democracy as being a negative thing?
I've not got an opinion on it. I've not really thought seriously about its introduction, I guess. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking because in terms of what we're actually putting forward to the Australian people is to give them an opportunity, an unprecedented opportunity. We're creating a paradigm shift within Australian political history for their voices to be heard, not once every 3 years, not once every 6 years, but every day on every issue, should they choose to do so.
But how useful is a 3% of the vote of an electorate in trying to determine the view of an electorate?
No. In terms of we want every Australian. You were saying about how small percentage, and I was saying, and I argued back to you in terms of you want to talk small percentages, talk about the status quo, where you've only got 2% of the population controlling 98% of the population.
But unless you can't, your system will not allow you to have a system of compulsory voting. So could you really expect more than that 2 or 3% that to take part in that vote to, I guess, try to influence your vote?
Good point you raised there about compulsory voting, because all that compulsory voting does for the people that don't want to vote is for them to go in and put a mark through the ballot or to create a donkey vote, which I don't suggest that they do. In terms of our vote is the most valuable thing we have as Australian citizens, and everyone should make sure they vote for who they want, and not just throw away something that's got so much value.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.